The onslaught of Europe on India started with the Portuguese pirates in 17th century, but it was high time when the English disguised as traders established bases with an eye on India's wealth and land. Shah Waliullah Mohd Dehlvi was the first person who apprehended the danger. He chalked out a plan of complete revolution. Shah Waliullah's various books reflect his thought and propound a complete framework. Shah Waliullah is the front runner of this field. Later his sons and pupils forwarded his mission. Meanwhile, the company began to expand its area. It resulted in a fierce fight between the company and Siraj-ud-Dawla in Palasi, Bengal in 1757. Siraj-ud-Dawla was defeated and the door was opened for Britain to occupy Bengal. Afterwards, Hyder Ali and his son Tipu Sultan stood up to stop English steps in southern India. But this campaign suffered a major setback due to internal treachery, and Tipu Sultan was martyred fighting in Seringapatam in 1799. The English general climbed up his dead body and shouted, "From today, India is ours." Finally, one day in 1803, the Mughal king in Delhi was forcibly asked to sign a treaty that read, "The people for Allah, the country for King, His Majesty, and the order for the company." Meanwhile, Shah Abdul Aziz, who was observing the situation very carefully, issued a fatwa saying that India has turned into a Darul Harb, non-Muslim country. Muslims must wage war against the British, but the ground was not prepared to start any revolutionary movement. So Sayyid Ahmad Shahid, a disciple of Shah Abdul Aziz, with his companions migrated to Kandahar in Afghanistan in search of a land from where he can run a revolutionary movement. Unfortunately, the greatest militant movement of the subcontinent suffered sedition of Afghans and finally collapsed. The remaining people, especially the Ulama Sadiqpur, continued their mission inside India. It is noteworthy that the caravan of freedom was led purely by Muslims till 1857, since the power was snatched from Muslims, so they were naturally first enemies of the alien government. According to historians, 27,000 Muslims were only hanged to death. Shah Zafar was exiled to Rangoon and his descendants were finished off. After the failure of 1857 revolution, the Muslim leaders changed their strategy. They started setting up educational institutions across the country to combat the disastrous British policies. And the foremost of them was Maulana Muhammad Qasim Nanavati and his colleagues, who established Darul in Deoband to produce a team of ulama who could fight eye to eye with the British government. The First World War was adapted in the Indian subcontinent. Around the first student of Darul Deoband, Maulana Muhammad al-Hasan, known as Sheikhul Hind, chalked out a plan known as Reshmi Romal movement, Silk Letter movement. Sheikhul Hind had a secret agreement with Ottoman Caliphate of Turkey to attack on British bases in India and prepare ground for revolt. But this plan also was sabotaged. Consequently, he was arrested and sent to Malta Island. Around 1919, Jamiat Ulama Hind came into being to provide Muslims a platform to fight against the English. It is worth mentioning that it was Jamiat which taught the Congress to follow the path to freedom. Otherwise, it was not founded with sole purpose of independence. The Jamiat leaders worked closely with the Congress and inspired it to adopt a complete freedom program. Maulana Abul Kalam Azad was the hero of India's independence. Through his writing and particularly newspaper Al-Hilal and Al-Balagh, he headed up the subcontinent with warm slogans of freedom. He headed the Congress especially in the most crucial times of independence history during the Second World War and afterwards. It was the continuous pressure and wise policy of the Congress under his leadership that materialized the dream of freedom in shorter period. Today, it is tragic enough that the Muslims are blamed that they are traitors. Muslim fighters, instead of being paid homage, are removed from all textbooks and history, while many Hindu and community thinks that the Muslims have got their share in the form of Pakistan. But they forget that still India has more Muslims than Pakistan or any other country in the world except Indonesia. The purpose of mentioning these sacrifices is to remind you of brave past.